Adopt Technology's The Elephant in the Room podcast brings you gigantic tech stories that inspire. These are creators, innovators, and change makers. Every episode, our guests embody one of the core values that makes Adopt so different from every other tech company. Much like an elephant, guests on this show are emotionally intelligent and ready to make a gigantic impact on the world. In studio with us today, a guest we are all very excited about. I mean, you have a huge fan club. Francine Hardaway, Ph.D., a serial entrepreneur, communications strategist, and co-founder of Stealthmode Partners, an accelerator and advocate for entrepreneurs in technology and healthcare. Prior to Stealthmode, she owned 2 marketing companies and served as director of worldwide press relations for Intel and the CMO of innovative environmental products. Francine is also the publisher of the Stealthmode blog and Aging Revealed. And I'm sure I left a bunch of stuff out.
Yeah, I'm the mother of 2. I'm the foster mom of 3 and the grandmother of 17.
I mean, you've just lived such an inspired life. I really couldn't think of a better guest to have on this podcast. You have been supporting women in tech for 50 years.
Yes, and this is why when all of this stuff about women's movements comes out and women are fighting for things like abortion rights, we did that already in the 60s. It's so upsetting how slow it is to bring about change.
How did you get your start in tech?
Randomly. I was an English professor and I got bored teaching. And so I went to my editor at the New Times where I was writing film reviews. And I said, what can I do with these writing skills? And he said, well, you could be in PR. I had no idea what PR was, but, because I had a Ph.D., I had research skills. So I went to the library and looked up public relations and found out what it did. And I figured that I could definitely do it. And so I sent out a press release, looked up the format, sent out a press release and announced that I was in public relations. But before I did that, I did what Steve Blank now calls leaving the building and talking to your customers. I had a lot of friends at the time who played tennis at Phoenix Country Club like I did. And I had meetings with all of them. And I said, if I were in PR, would you hire me? And what would you ask me to do? And when 3 told me they would hire me and told me what they wanted me to do and were actually kind of enthusiastic, I just quit my job, which destroyed my marriage. But I quit my job and sent out the press release that said, Hardaway Connections has opened for business. And I started in real estate development because that was Phoenix, real estate development. I did the PR for the what is now the I-10 west of central Phoenix. But anyway, I was doing all this economic development, public relations. And in 1986, there was the Tax Reform Act or the Tax Simplification Act or the Throw All the Developers Out of Business Act. And all my clients went broke and their banks went broke. And I by this time was the single mom of 2 young kids. And I was like, oh boy.
What do I do?
What do I do? Yeah, I've got to segue into something else. So I tried looking for what was counter-cyclical to real estate, and it really turned out to be technology, which at the time it was. And so I tried looking for technology clients, and I got this one client that was a claims processing software company. And, at the time, it was, God, I've even forgotten what it's called, but it didn't go through the cloud. It went through cables, and it allowed people to send electronic claims, and Medicare had just made a ruling that they weren't going to accept any more paper claims. So there was like a wild west of claims processing companies, one of which was in Phoenix and one of which hired me. So I learned about claims processing, and from there I segued into healthcare. And healthcare has a very specialized vocabulary, and healthcare at the time was much more connected to technology than it maybe is now, because everything was all about infrastructure and wires and cables and stuff like that. So you had to know a lot about how the background tech worked in order to actually sell the service.
You were in all of these emerging business arenas.
Totally. I love, first of all, I'm a futurist. And when I was a college professor, I ran a program called the Arizona Futures Institute. And I've always wanted to be in emerging arenas. So this was actually perfect for me. Real estate wasn't, because it wasn't really an emerging arena, but real estate has always paid really, really well. Healthcare, as it turns out, paid nearly as well. And just plain old infrastructure and technology was good too.
Can you talk a little bit more? Because I imagine so many folks who are going to be listening to this show are futurists. They're innovators. They're people who want to dig deep and push themselves past their own limits.
Yeah, you know, those are all buzz phrases.
Yeah.
You have to go where your curiosity leads you. And my curiosity had always led me toward healthcare because my first husband was a medical student. And so I got up close and personal to healthcare. And the electronic claims processing was not the kind of healthcare that I loved, but it was a part that would do to get me into the field. And then I went to work for the first HMO that operated in Arizona. And I learned all about managed care. Well, managed care was the great gift that keeps on giving, because once you get into who pays for healthcare and who benefits from healthcare and what companies, benefit from healthcare and what happens to the patients in healthcare, it is lifelong and getting more.
Can you talk about your spirit and whether or not you feel that you're fearless? And I like how you bat down buzz phrases.
Everyone says I'm fearless.
You do seem to be a fearless woman.
Yes, that is a carefully constructed, mask. I was just trying to think back on it. First of all, I had 3 successful businesses, counting Stealthmode, and I have never felt successful. Never. Ever, ever, ever. I have always felt one step from bankruptcy. And if you talk to my children about when they were growing up, one of my daughters actually thought we went bankrupt. I talked about, oh my God, we're going to have to go bankrupt. And I prepared for it. I mean, my best friend and my running buddy was a bankruptcy lawyer. And we used to go through all the various scenarios of how I would deal with this bankruptcy that never happened. But I always expected it to happen. And I was always petrified. And every once in a while, I would have panic attacks. Now, am I fearless? Sure, because it's all behind me. I can look fearless now, but no person in business is ever fearless. And that's another thing that's just a lot of BS. The whole entrepreneurship thing, so much BS. When I was doing business in Silicon Valley, what I learned was how many entrepreneurs either committed suicide or came close to committing suicide because in fact, there were so many of them, that if they failed, they felt like they had to kill themselves. And what happened was that the entire industry had to take a look at this. And that happened maybe the beginning of the 21st century. The entire industry started looking at itself and saying, okay, we can't do this. So we have to turn around our feelings about failure. And the venture capitalists basically started that because they felt that they would like to invest in somebody who had failed once, because that person would probably be a better entrepreneur, which I actually do believe is true, because you do need one failure. It's kind of like your trial marriage. Where you get a chance to do whatever it is that you do wrong, and you learn, and then you try to avoid the minefields.
Tell me about stealth mode on the subject of entrepreneurs, because that's your focus in large part for stealth mode.
Right. Well, after I sold my second company to Intel, which, by the way, I didn't realize, I didn't even have the terminology for the word exit. Intel reached out to me, and they needed marketing, tech marketing in Arizona, because California really looked down on Arizona, and nobody from California Intel wanted to go to Arizona Intel. So they reached out to me, and I said, I can't come work for you. I have 15 employees. And they said, well, fine, we'll take your employees. And I'm like, well, I have an office lease. Fine, we'll pay off your office lease. I had no idea that I was negotiating.
Right.
Do you understand?
Right.
It was like from the heart. Mm-hmm. These are my circumstances. Take it or leave it. And I never thought they'd take it. I really didn't, mm-hmm. because I kept asking for, and my people need new laptops. And, but I really, even after 20 years of owning businesses, I had no idea what a small nit I was on Intel's balance sheet.
Right.
And I kept saying, can we have 5 more laptops? And they would be like, sure. Can I have a signing bonus? Sure. I was like, oh my God. And so they did it, and the deal got signed. And I went to work in Intel, and I was like, oh my God, I'm in Intel. I don't know one single thing about semiconductors. I have to learn a whole new industry. But, Ed, my partner in Stealth Mode, has a phrase for me, and it's called a phrase for how I operate. And he is like, Francine jumps while I'm still packing my parachute. He's like, I'm packing my parachute, making sure that it's going to open. Francine jumps without a parachute, and she always lands in a pile of feathers. And it is very weird. I have followed my instincts. I have followed my heart's a terrible word to say in technology, but I have followed my heart. I have followed my gut reactions, and I have always come out well. And I don't ever see that until after the fact.
You brought up something there interesting. Is there room for heart in tech?
Well, yes. I mean, now there really is room for heart in tech, because so much of consumer social media, is people.
There has been a significant shift.
There has been a huge shift. First of all, there are many more women in tech. They used to be 0. I cannot tell you how during the first 20 years of my career, I was the only woman in every room, but everyone my age will tell you, that they were the only woman in every room. Well, where were we? We were spread out across the country, but there weren't that many of us. So most all of us lived in a man's world. And in a man's world, you would say things. And here's a perfect example. I got into Intel, and I was supporting this group that was doing handheld, at the time they were called handheld computers. And it was about the time of the Apple Newton and the Palm Pilot, and it was just at the beginning. And Intel had a meeting one day, and I was in it, and they said, well, we're going to shut down this handheld computer unit because it's not making any money. And I said, don't do that. It's just on the verge. It's just starting. And they were like, yeah, but the Newton has just failed. And I, as a woman who had traveled through airports with a compact computer that weighed, I looked it up the other day, 50 pounds, thinking of that as a portable computer, I was like, no, you don't understand. Women are coming in the workforce in droves, and they're going to love handheld computers, and it's going to be fine. And these engineers rolled their eyes and looked at me and they said, where's your data? And I said, I don't need data. I have 20 years of experience and I am the market. And they were like, you're a data point. And I was like, okay, when is this year up? And you've asked me how Stealth Mode got started.
Yeah, I mean, I am so fascinated really by so many components of your story. And you talk about being the only woman in the room. Did that bother you?
I didn't notice it most of the time, but I realized afterwards, and especially in the last 2 years, spending so much time on Clubhouse, I realized that the stuff I endured, my butt has been grabbed from every conceivable angle. And I never thought to say anything about it because that's just the way it was, especially in tech. People hit on you. They hit on you at conferences. A lot of stuff happened that women in tech just took for granted because you wanted to be in tech. Or anyway, I can't talk for other women. I wanted to be there. And I didn't realize I was making sacrifices in terms of my own well-being until much later after the Me Too movement. And I was like, holy cow, maybe I shouldn't have let that happen to me. Maybe I should have fought it then. But the fact of the matter is I didn't. I took it for the cost of doing business. It was like giving mordida in Mexico. I was like,
do you ever regret not speaking up, or do you think regret is a wasted emotion?
Regret is a wasted emotion.
I tend to agree with you there.
I regret nothing. I had what I could refer to in my own terms and my own goals as a stellar career, in the sense that I was able to send, these were my goals when I went into business. I have 2 children, they're daughters. I want to send them to Ivy League schools. And those were my goals. And when the time came to send them to those schools, I was able to do it out of cash flow. I just, when the school would send me a bill, I would write a check, which meant I didn't have to borrow money. I didn't have to save money.
Money you made.
This was my money.
Yeah.
I made it, and I spent it on the girls. And then after the girls grew up and went away, I spent it on the foster children. And, as a woman in tech, those might be different goals than a man's goals. But it's interesting how they led me to pretty much the same place,
Yes.
And I'm not sure what I would have done if I had been a man. Would I have swung for the fences? Would I have borrowed money? Would I have done what I now know is the normal thing to do? Would I have raised money? I've raised money for clients, but I've never raised money for myself. And I've never asked for money for myself.
You were too busy just jumping while everyone else was packing their parachutes.
Yes, exactly. And when Ed and I started Stealth Mode, it was because after a year at Intel, I couldn't stand it anymore. All the desks looked alike. All the cubicles looked alike. It was hard to tell where I was in the building. And that was figurative as well as literal. And the job that I was doing didn't really need to be done. The only reason, it had people under me that actually did it. So I reported to someone who reported to Andy Grove. And I got really friendly with Andy Grove because I always get friendly with the founders and the CEOs because that's I see into their hearts. And so when Andy Grove got kicked upstairs as chairman, I really, that was the end of it for me at Intel. And I had, I only had to stay a year for my stock to vest. So I left. And at the time it was the internet. And I was like, okay, what's coming next? The internet. So I found this guy, Ed, and he had this group called the Arizona Internet Professionals Association, and he had grown it to like almost 3,000 people. So this was a signal to both of us that there was opportunity. And it was during the dot-com bubble, and we decided we were going to start this accelerator. And we went ahead and started it, and we raised $8 million for the first company that we raised money for in it. Well, you couldn't possibly have more hubris than that.
Yeah.
And then the bubble burst and the party was over.
When you came into contact with Ed, you were telling us a story before we started recording that you said to him, I'm a middle-aged short woman.
Oh,
I need to team up with you. How old were you at the time?
Let's see, 55, and Ed was 27 or something.
So 55 years old, woman making another major transition.
Yes, exactly.
Into something new.
Yes, exactly. And then, once we started Stealthmode, we had to bob and weave and change the business model for Stealthmode every few years because the market changed so much. And finally, tech companies, there used to be nobody teaching entrepreneurs how to run a business. And then suddenly everybody was teaching entrepreneurs how to run a business. And that's kind of when I decided that I would bow out of teaching tech entrepreneurs how to run a business. And that's when I started the Arizona Entrepreneurship Conferences. And I started a foundation called Opportunity Through Entrepreneurship Foundation. This was, I'm going to say, 2008 or 9, because I realized that my foster kids did not have access to all of this, knowledge about how to run a business. They had a lot of skills and they could run businesses, I would guess, but they needed some polishing. So I switched into marginalized entrepreneurs, and that's kind of where I've been until I switched into Clubhouse, and I became an investor in Clubhouse, and then I switched in, and I at the same time switched into cryptocurrency, and so now I'm off the deep end in the in the deep water again in NFTs and cryptocurrency, and I've realized now that that's where I want to be.
You are someone who never takes your foot off the gas, it strikes me. I mean, you talk about, how you're 80. You don't mind me saying that, right?
No, not at all. I own it.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. And I just love the fact that you're continuing to bring vibrancy into whatever market you're in.
What good is it to be alive if you're not bringing something to whatever you're in? You know what I mean? I'm like, I have a lot to contribute. I've seen so much that I'm like a piece of living history at this point in my life. And I have to explain to people what's new about the world they live in compared to what's the same principle as when I was coming up. Because some things are new. I mean, you can start a company now for 50 cents. And that really wasn't true back in the day. But on the other hand, you still have to leave the building and talk to customers, and you still have to know how to manage people. And there's so many things that you still have to know how to do.
What is your advice to women in tech, reflecting on what you've been through? And I'm always careful because I don't like to overgeneralize. I know that's a general question. But if you were to look back at your younger self and give yourself a piece of advice.
Wow. Learning as I went was what I did, but you don't have to do that anymore. You can learn how to code when you're 3 now. I taught myself to code when I was about 76.
That is so cool, by the way.
There's ways of making yourself more market ready. And you need to like look out. You need to have like a broad horizon, and you need to scan your broad horizon every day and try to figure out where markets are going and try to put yourself in the path of where the market is going. And this is not just advice for women. I can't tell you how many times I've said to men, you have to get on the train in the direction it's going. You're not going to go anywhere by, saying, I want to make it go this way. It's not going to go that way. It's going to go the direction it always was going in the first place.
Well, that's sometimes the difficulty, and you've worked a lot with entrepreneurs, and I've read a lot of your blogs that you've written for various big publications. And sometimes entrepreneurs, and I've seen you write about it, might have a brilliant idea, but is not the way the train is moving.
Yeah, and that's the problem, and that's what I found in coaching. I still do a lot of coaching, but I can now tell in the first 10 minutes, is this person coachable? Because if this person is coachable, we can have a conversation about how to make whatever they want to do successful. They might have to go, here comes another buzzword, they might have to pivot and go in a slightly different direction. But you can make a lot of ideas succeed if you're not rigid. And the thing that I've fought the most in my career is rigidity. It's people who think they're right.
Yeah.
It's people who think they're right. And now it happens in politics, it happens in everything. And you have to remember, and this is where I ruin my credibility by saying I'm a Buddhist, but you have to remember that opinions are just thoughts in the mind, and they come and go. And the worst thing that you can do is try to grab onto them and hold onto them.
What is it that inspires you personally?
Being a help to somebody, being a mom. Being useful, bringing something. I mean, it's why I came to be on this podcast. I'm not marketing myself. I'm not, but if I could help Tony, if I could help you, if I could help Brett, if I could help anybody by driving 4 miles and talking for an hour, I'm down for it.
And do you think that part of your success is that you've always been open to learning and to challenging yourself?
All of it. And I think everyone's success is due to their being open to learning. Really. I mean, I've met some of the most famous entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, and what's really cool about them is that they are open to learning. I mean, they're exploring Mars. They don't need to do that. And, there's other issues involved with it, but they're exploring. The best and most interesting people are the explorers.
Throughout all of this, and again, I said off the top of the show, I cannot underscore how excited everyone on the team was that you were coming in today. You are considered a true rock star, a woman many women look up to. Your resume speaks for itself and then some, but you also are very nice and humble.
I hope so.
But that not everybody is able to hold on to that.
That's interesting because my goal is to be nice. My goal, what I want to do is be helpful. What I don't want to do, and I actually fought this when I was in business, because when you go into business and people give you, my watch just told me to stand. Anyway, I'll resist. I'll resist till the end.
You have the cardio
show.
Watch that reminds you.
I have the Apple Watch, and it's like time to stand. Okay. So when I was first managing people and I was less sure of myself, I was a bitch. And a number of people who worked with me called that to my attention. And for a long time, I fought it. And I said, I've got to be that way. That's how you have to be to get any respect. If you're a woman in business, blah, blah, blah. And then I finally realized that I don't have to be that way. And I could be nice. Yoga did that to me. Actually, practicing yoga came to me at the same time that I started Stealth Mode, and at the same time that I started studying Eastern philosophy. And that really beveled my edges.
Yes.
And
it strikes me too that you didn't let being a woman deter you. You also didn't let age deter you ever. I mean, I watched the Tina Turner documentary not long ago. I had never realized that she really did not ascend to true Tina Turnerism until she was really middle-aged.
Right, because she was beaten until then by Ike.
I didn't know the trajectory really of her story until I watched that.
A lot of women come into their own at middle age because before that, they are burdened by the expectations of society. They're not as set in stone as they were, but it's still get married, have a baby, be a wife, be whatever. And so what happens is that women come into their own. Probably, I started my business when I was 38. I would say 40 is about it when women hit their stride.
When people listen to this show or watch it, what would you like them to take away from your story?
I didn't do anything very spectacular, and you can also do it, but you have to keep learning. Learning. The world is changing so fast. Hold on to nothing. Hold on to no opinion. Hold on to no prejudice. Hold on to nothing.
Francine, thank you so much for coming in today. I mean, I can't tell you how much we appreciate having you here. And I know that your life story inspires so many people.
What's bad about talking for an hour to a nice woman?
I love it. You're welcome back anytime. Yeah. Francine Hardaway, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for listening and watching. I'm CAREY PENA. Let's talk about what we heard. Such an inspirational interview. We are joined now by Brett Helgeson, who is the CEO of Adopt Technologies and the sponsor of this podcast. That interview right there is the very reason you wanted this podcast to happen.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, Francine is a legend in her own right, and obviously look at the legacy that she's going to leave behind. She's just been a landmark in the Arizona, and not only Arizona, national technology space. So it's been wonderful to listen to that interview, and she's been an inspiration for sure.
What were your main takeaways?
One thing well, first of all, I never even realized that she also fostered children. I knew she had a couple daughters, but I didn't know that she fostered children. And obviously to me, that's near and dear because of our adoption story. And being a foster parent, I think just goes right along with the selfless nature of her being that she really expressed.
What inspired you about what she said?
One thing that is amazing to me, obviously the component of always being willing to learn, right? Success is about your willingness to be able to learn from others. And then having the courage to obviously pivot, and to go with your gut and to be able to make changes based on what you see in the horizon. I think what is amazing to me, though, she is, from a never-ending learning perspective,
yes.
To start to learn how to code at 76.
Yes.
Blew my mind.
Yes.
Like, it is absolutely amazing. And so I think she's just one of those pioneers. She's not afraid to try anything. And it's such an admirable quality to have.
What do you think Francine's story, what do you think that says about the world of tech? Because she was ahead of her time. She talked about how she was a woman many times in a room full of men. It's changing, but not as fast as we might like. But what do you think her story says? Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's still difficult to find plenty of women in tech. We struggle to find candidates that are moving into that industry consistently. But her story as a whole, and she talked about this a little bit, just some of the stuff that she went through, going through obviously male-dominated industries, which are still significantly male-dominated, and the type of things that she, quote unquote, just considered a cost of doing business is just horrific in a lot of ways. And I know that a lot of that stuff still exists. And it's just so incredibly frustrating to see that people don't just view everybody on their qualities, what they're able to do, and forget about gender, forget about race, all of that. Just focus on what they bring to the table.
Since you are running a major technology company, Adopt Technologies, what is your goal and mission to try to change the trajectory going forward?
Well, I mean, we want to be a destination employer and a destination IT partner. And so in order to do that, you got to be the best on a lot of fronts. And in order to be the best at a lot of fronts, you have to leave all prejudices aside and focus on creating a harmonious environment where you're welcoming all thoughts, ideas, opinions, races, genders. It doesn't matter, right? It's about bringing together collectively a group of really inspired and talented individuals and working together towards the same common goal.
And you are actively recruiting and hiring. Where can people find out more?
Absolutely. Please go to our website, www.adopttechnologies.com, or you can just directly call our main office number and tell them you're a talented individual looking for a position, and they'll put you in touch with the right people.
I like that. Hey, I'm a talented individual. Can I speak to someone? Yes, we'll put you right through.
That's right.
Brett, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for listening and watching. I'm CAREY PENA.